Alan Albright considered himself a vanguard of Western civilization, not merely a man, but an ideological fortress against what he termed the rising tide of cultural dissolution. His rhetoric was always meticulous, laced with historical references and pseudoscientific terminology, terms like genetic preservation, ethnocultural integrity, and the existential threat of miscegenation. He led the American Purity Collective, a well-funded organization that presented its white nationalist agenda not with torches and shouts, but with tailored suits and televised debates. He was a refined face of hate, and he possessed the physical attributes: the towering height, the perfect Nordic jawline, and the famously cold, crystalline blue eyes, to match his narrative of racial superiority. His wife, Carol, a quiet woman who managed to collect his extensive mailing list and donor relations, was a mirror of his life's work, impeccably maintained, traditional, and flawlessly European in appearance. For Alan's 55th birthday, she presented him with a small, sleek box containing a popular direct-to-consumer genetic ancestry test. "Alan, dear," she had murmured, her voice soft in the stillness of their library, "I know you dismissed these things as trifles, but think of the powerful statement. Imagine the press release. Genetic science confirms Albright's unblemished European lineage. It would be the ultimate proof for the faithful." Alan had smiled, a thin, satisfied curl of the lip. "An elegant idea, Carol. A scientific nail in the coffin of their diversity myth. Very well. Let us turn their own feeble tool against them." He performed the cheek swab with a sense of ritualistic defiance, sealing the sample in the tube as if he were sealing the fate of his opponents. The sample was shipped. The wait time was projected at 4 to 6 weeks. For Alan, it was merely an administrative pause before a foregone conclusion. Life, meanwhile, accelerated. Alan was slated for a massive profile piece in a major conservative publication, and more crucially, a one-on-one interview with the formidable primetime host, Eleanor Vance. This appearance was a culmination of his decade of work, a chance to push his new legislative agenda, the Ethnocultural Preservation Act, into the mainstream national conversation. The interview was scheduled for Thursday morning. The email arrived on the preceding Tuesday, hitting his inbox at 9:17 a.m. The subject line, "Your ancestry report is ready," was innocently mundane, yet it held the power to shatter his universe. Alan was alone in his office, preparing his talking points. He clicked the link, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and settled back, ready for the confirmation of his destiny. The page loaded slowly, the spinning icon accrual, drawn-out drumroll. When the results materialized, the stylized pie chart was dominated by a large, comforting azure segment. 72.8% Northwestern European, German, English, and Scandinavian ancestry. Alan nodded, a flicker of annoyance at the low percentage, but generally satisfied. Then his gaze flicked to the next largest segment. It was a jarring, unexpected shock of deep amber, sitting like a wound on the pristine chart. 17.5% Sub-Saharan African. The coffee mug slipped from his hand, hitting the thick wool rug with a dull thud. The dark liquid spread like a stain, mirroring the corruption he saw on the screen. 17.5%. Not a trace element. Not a statistical anomaly. This was a significant, undeniable genetic heritage. This was a truth that pointed to a non-European great-grandparent, possibly even a grandparent, and a secret that had been buried beneath generations of fabricated superiority. Alan felt the blood drain from his face, leaving a cold, waxen mask. He scrambled to his feet, knocking his chair over, and rushed to the full-length mirror behind his bar. He stared at his reflection, clawing at his skin, as if it could peel off the layers that contained the lie. His pale skin, his blue eyes, his flaxen hair, all suddenly felt like a deceit, a masterful genetic camouflage hiding the very impurity he had dedicated his life to exterminate. He was the very thing he taught millions of people to fear. He was mixed, a fraud, a mutt, to use a precise slur he often employed against others. The next few hours were a vortex of blind, suffocating panic. He tried to contact the company, threatening legal action, screaming about a conspiracy. They politely, factually, informed him of the accuracy of their S&P chip testing and offered a second free test, an offer he found instantly terrifying. He spent the evening scrolling through historical records, desperate for flaw in the Albright lineage. He found nothing but dead ends and carefully curated gaps around his paternal grandfather, a notoriously silent and secretive man who had mysteriously relocated the family from coastal Maine to Boston in the 1920s. A silent lurch of dread confirmed his grandfather's silence was likely complicity. On Wednesday, the pressure was unbearable. The weight of the 17.5% felt like a physical deformity. Every sentence he drafted for the television interview felt hypocritical, every word a potential snare. He canceled all routine meetings, claiming a sudden flu. That afternoon, the phone in his office rang. It was an anonymous number. He answered with a cautious, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was smooth, calm, and deeply resonant. It was the voice of a man utterly in control. "Dr. Albright," the voice said without preamble. "A shame about that 17.5%. Quite the inconvenient truth for a purist. Wouldn't you agree?" Alan gripped the phone, his knuckles white. Who is this? How do you know that number?" "It doesn't matter who I am. It only matters that I have the complete, verified report, a copy of the electronic file, securely backed up and ready for immediate dissemination." The voice paused, allowing the threat to sink in. "Think of the impact, Alan. Right before your big interview. The ultimate irony." "What do you want?" Alan whispered, defeated. "Money? How much?" "Oh, Alan, you always think in financial terms. That's your flaw. I want something much more valuable than money. I want the truth for once." The voice laid out the ultimatum, simple and devastating. "You have two options, Alan. Option A, you appear on Eleanor Vance's program tomorrow, and you promote your Ethno-Cultural Preservation Act. 30 minutes into the live interview, I released the DNA file to every major news outlet, accompanied by a lengthy statement detailing the lie. You are destroyed and humiliated by your own genetics. And option B?" Alan asked, his voice raw. "Option B, you go on the air. You publicly, unequivocally denounce the American Purity Collective. You declare that its principles are based on a profound biological lie. You state that you, its founder, are the living proof of that lie. You spend the rest of your life using your platform to undo the damage you have caused. If you choose B, I keep the results private, and you live with the truth alone. You have until airtime tomorrow." The phone clicked dead. Alan sat in the silence, the terror of option A battling the crushing devastation of option B. Option A meant the spectacular ruin of his public self. Option B meant the private, agonizing ruin of his entire identity and life's work. The chantageur had given him the choice between two deaths, both absolute. Thursday morning, the day of the interview, Alan was driven to the network studios, his silence in the back seat oppressive. He looked over his talking points one last time. The words were now meaningless dust. He was ushered into the green room, where his assistant Mark, a young zealot with a severe haircut, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Dr. Albright, sir, we are ready to rock them. The act is genius. Just hit them hard on the biological imperative, sir. Hit them with the purity angle." Alan merely nodded, feeling like an actor about to walk onto a stage for an execution. He was wired with a microphone, powdered, and led onto the set. Eleanor Vance, an intimidating presence in person, greeted him with a professional, sharp smile. The show began. The initial minutes were spent on small talk and political maneuvering. Then Eleanor turned serious. "Dr. Albright," she began, her tone shifting to adversarial. "Let's discuss the core of your mission, the Ethno-Cultural Preservation Act. It hinges on the concept of preserving a pure ancestral core. Where is the scientific basis for this pure core?" Alan looked past the bright lights, into the camera lens. He felt the cold pressure of the 17.5% in his veins, the silent ticking clock of the chantageur's deadline. He had to choose. He looked down at his tailored sleeve, a symbol of the European tradition, and felt the dark, foreign blood beneath it. He picked up his glass of water, took a long, slow sip, and set it down. "Veronica," he began, his voice gravelly, "I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the act, but I'm afraid I won't be discussing it today. I won't be discussing the American Purity Collective at all." Eleanor Vance's composure cracked, her smile vanishing. Dr. Albright, this is a live national broadcast. What exactly are you saying? Alan leaned forward, his blue eyes, once symbols of his doctrine, now haunted by the truth. He looked directly at the camera, ignoring the frantic signals from the control room. I am saying, Alan stated, his voice gaining a hollow resonance, that the foundation of the American Purity Collective, and every concept of racial purity that I have spent my life preaching, is a biological lie, a dangerous, cruel, and absolute falsehood. The studio fell into stunned silence, broken only by the distant squawk of headsets in the control booth. I was wrong, Alan continued, the admission tearing to his pride like shrapnel. Profoundly and catastrophically wrong. The concept of an unblemished line is a myth. The very concept of racial purity is biological fiction. And I know this because I am the living proof of it. Eleanor Vance, recovering her professionalism, pressed him. Proof, Dr. Albright? You, the face of this movement, are recanting its core tenet. How can you substantiate such a stunning reversal? Alan swallowed, his throat dry. He knew this moment was the annihilation of his life. I recently took a genetic ancestry test, he confessed, the words tasting like ash. The results demonstrate what any honest geneticist knows. There is no pure line. The man who stood here and demanded separation, who fought against miscegenation, is himself genetically mixed. He paused, letting the truth hang in the air, a poisonous bloom. I have sub-Saharan African ancestry. Significant African ancestry. I have been preaching a lie that my own blood contradicts. He looked directly into the camera one last time, a broken icon. I resign. I denounce the American Purity Collective and urge every one of its followers to abandon this hateful path. It is a fraud. I was a fraud. The network immediately cut the feed to a local news update, the sudden switch jarring and incomplete. Alan Albright stood up from the desk. His purpose evaporated, his identity dissolved. He was escorted out of the studio through a back door, avoiding the media storm that was already gathering outside. He got into his waiting car, now utterly alone. His phone was already vibrating nonstop, not with messages of support, but with a torrent of white-hot hatred and betrayal from his former followers. When he finally made it back to his desolate office, he found one final email. It was from the anonymous sender. The subject line, Option B, the hardest choice. Alan Albright leaned his head against the cold mahogany desk, utterly defeated. He was safe from public exposure, a small, hollow victory. But the truth was out there, carried by his own words, condemning him. He had chosen to destroy his movement rather than allow his impurity to destroy him. He was a survivor, yes, but survivor permanently scarred by the 17.5% truth that had transformed him from a powerful ideologue into a solitary, publicly despised man, forced to live in a world where his own biology was his greatest shame and his inescapable.